Lyn Rutherford manages green infrastructure vegetation for the City of Chattanooga, Tennessee Water Quality Program. Her degree in biology from Warren Wilson College, her background in wildlife conservation and exotic invasive management, and her experience in commercial fine gardening have led her to manage bioretention, green roofs, riparian buffers, detention ponds with ecological conscientiousness and a maintenance-saving approach. She's an advocate for native plants, water resource protection, and other sustainable landscaping practices. So with that, Lyn, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Hi. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate the chance to share a land steward's perspective on this subject. So we're going to zoom out a little and get some practical field experience. As Eric said, I manage green infrastructure sites for the City of Chattanooga. I am not a forester or a certified arborist, but I am a kind of specialized native plant water quality gardener with an ecological perspective. With some collaboration with my city forester, Gene Hyde, I do take care of trees in my bioretention and detention ponds. Also, I'm not a landscape architect or an engineer. I really am here today as the voice of maintenance, or I would call land management and stewardship. Pictured here, this is one of my favorite sites to manage. We are looking from the side of a parking lot. The basin dips down there with Panicum virgatum off to the left, switchgrass. We have a serviceberry, Amelanchier arborea, river birch, some carex cherokeensis, Andropogon ternarius, that gorgeous red haze of purple lovegrass, maybe an agostiki, some coreopsis there. So I wanted to share the phrase favorite site to manage because I think it is significant that my team and I actually really like working here. This is diverse native planting, and it duly attracts a lot of pollinators and other wildlife. It's dynamic. It's new every time we visit, and we love it. And, you know, in terms of insurance for a site, having employees that care about their work is really priceless. Okay, so I think Andrew already discussed some of these benefits of incorporating trees into your bioretention. I think the water quality benefits listed here will do a lot to extend the life of a basin and keep it functioning and infiltrating that water, doing its job. As with other woodies and the herbaceous layer, aesthetics are great. Public opinion really matters, especially for a municipal site, right? The client, the public is my client. But function is essential, and those two things definitely are not, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. So priorities, the trees and other plants, they are there to work hard and not just look pretty. Let's see. So yeah, we've got more benefits here. Bioretention is an opportunity to inject more tree diversity into your urban areas. I know that is an objective with managing urban forests. In case you haven't heard about the connection between native plants and supporting local ecosystems, just a quick example from Doug Tallamy, a famous entomologist. So 90% of all insects that eat plants, herbivorous insects, require native plants to complete their development, their whole life cycle. So if correspondingly, also, we've got 96% of all terrestrial birds rearing their young on insects. So if we don't have those insects, if we don't have those native plants supporting those insects, we don't have insects for baby birds. So basically, when we plant exotic plants, we are reducing the carrying capacity for that environment. It's something to think about. Trees native to your area are a great choice, adapted to your climate and your conditions. Plus, this is something I think about a lot. Native plants aren't going to turn on you, right? Like calorie pear or mimosa. These were once thought to be charming ornamentals, and now I think of them as like common criminals, threatening our nation's wildlands and farmlands, ganging up on native plants. Okay, I'm getting a little carried away, but yeah, so just something to consider there as well. Another great thing about diversity of plant species, including tree species, is having a diversity of root morphologies and interactions in the soil. I would love to see a study about this. I just bet that boosting the diversity of, your diversity of plant species used is going to have a positive impact on your soil life, that's better at remediating the pollutants that we find washing into bioretention. And it's certainly better, I can say it's better at filling a space, right? So different above ground forms and below ground forms are going to be better at keeping weeds at bay, controlling erosion, keeping that stormwater infiltrating with fluffy active soils. Trees also make a statement to the general public, which is the vegetation is intentional here. This looks like a garden. It kind of helps with that communication. Also, trees can protect the plants around them, again, in that same sense of communicating to the mowing crew. If there's a mowing contract nearby, perhaps, they see that kind of grown-up area. They might not understand what it is. A tree can help, again, communicate that is an intentional planting. The last line there is not a joke. When I was asked to, do this webinar, my thoughts about trees and bioretention, my first reaction was, I love bioretention trees. They make the site so much more hospitable. My team and I are definitely taking our breaks under the trees. Think about being in the middle of a parking lot in the middle of the day, in the middle of July in Tennessee. It's downright dangerous without shade. So that's really a serious safety consideration for me. So a little background, Chattanooga, along with the other bigger cities in Tennessee, Nashville, Knoxville, and Memphis, have Phase 1 National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permits, NPDES permits. So we do the standard stuff that other cities do to manage our stormwater runoff and to try and protect our water resources and citizen health as mandated in the Federal Clean Water Act. We've got some great programs trying to incentivize more green infrastructure use in Chattanooga, design and implementation. That would be Green Grant and Rain Smart, other programs like that, assisting citizens. That picture there is a stream restoration site which has now been regraded and completely replanted. So that's another example of specialized vegetation that we work with. Okay, so this is just a little info about the sites that we manage. These are not official terms or categories. This is kind of just how I think about them, how we talk about them amongst ourselves. So naturalized sites are sites that are in natural areas like parks, typically. These can be quite beautiful, but are also not usually interpreted as gardens. They're interpreted as just kind of wild areas. The public is not necessarily aware that they are water quality functioning sites. They're not manicured. They are being managed for exotic invasives and water quality function. Pruning would be for line of sight or other safety concerns, but not necessarily a whole lot of aesthetic considerations with these sites. Maintenance can be pretty low, which is a plus. We've considered controlled burns and grazing as options at these sites. Haven't jumped into that yet, but that would make maintenance even easier. And that, that's something to consider with tree placement in an area like this. If you want to burn it or graze it, that would affect your species selection or maybe your placement. Coverage is not an issue with these sites. Tall, dense vegetation and diverse root systems are best for water quality purposes. like I said earlier, and these sites are definitely lush. So they are working hard for water quality. This type of design, of course, isn't appropriate everywhere. Very informal, I guess you could call it. So not necessarily great in front of an office building or something. Our biomimicry garden sites, also planted with natives, also diverse, may involve a seed mix, mostly planted with plugs, and try to use younger trees so they can kind of grow into the system as they age. A lot more plant placement control in the design for patterns and themes in the landscape, so more aesthetic focus here, maybe higher visibility, maybe within a context that looks more formal. We're going to be a lot more picky about weeding and pruning at these sites, and the trees are typically not placed within in turf, right? The trees are going to be within a planted garden-type bed at these sites. We get a lot of positive feedback from the public about these sites, a lot of interest, a lot of questions. I'd say function is really high with these sites as well, based on the lush coverage and the diversity of plants. This last category of sites is pretty work-intensive, relying heavily on mulch and turf. These sites typically have very few species present and fewer natives. They are often placed in monocultural swaths with individuals on wide centers not touching each other. So lots of mulch in between plants. These seem to be designed possibly for herbicide management, but of course toxic herbicides should be avoided in these areas that are meant to filter and remediate pollution out of stormwater. These sites can be quite striking and beautiful as well, very tidy appearance with proper maintenance. They potentially can be weeded by anyone, which may be a plus for some folks. No need for plant identification skills with these sites. I would bet that trees end up being the most highly functioning component of these landscapes if they're included in the design. The herbaceous layer tends to suffer in these landscapes over time, so that the trees end up pulling the bulk of the weight there. Mulch doesn't have roots, and turf has extremely shallow roots, so it seems to be less of a water quality offering. Yeah, and I would worry about the dearth of root morphologies and soil interactions negatively impacting the microbial life, the mycological stuff going on, the animal diversity in the soil. But as I said, this can look very tidy and formal, and it may fit in with the landscapes that a lot of people have to work with. So I hope I'm not being too hard on this type of design. It does represent a lot of what I see in Chattanooga. This is my opinion based on observation, trying to take care of these sites. They just do not seem as environmentally conscientious. And in other parts of the country, it really seems like we're moving away from non-native synthetic plant communities that require this much input. You know, and our industry is just always changing and improving, so I think that's part of the process. This is a not entirely complete list of tree species represented on my site. I apologize, there's a couple of shrubs in there. I'm not going to recommend certain species, I just thought I would include this for reference. My designers and city foresters agree that making plant recommendation lists can be problematic because to be worth much, they have to be pretty region specific. You have to consider the climate, right? I'm in the southeast, but even more specifically, the soil type present, the amount of soil volume, heat off the pavement, air pollution, wind, light levels, moisture in our case is very important, as Andrew was talking about, moisture in the soil. My former colleague, Wynn Miller, who's now in Knox County, had plants categorized by what zone of the basin she would like to see them planted in. So the very bottom of the basin would be the wettest area versus the sides or the top of the basin. Bioretention has really fast drawdown, so as Andrew said, you really got to this is challenging design. It's tough to find plants that can deal with these conditions of being inundated and in pretty droughty conditions. I'd say it's tough, but certainly not impossible. And I think there are definitely plants that will thrive in these areas. So considering, was this tree placed in conditions that it has evolved to thrive in? Gardeners and landscapers call that concept right plant, right place. Which brings me to this slide all about design. Yeah, let's see, so right plant, right place. Designing for, okay, so consolidating maintenance strategies, that would be like burning I was talking about earlier, thinking about how you're actually going to take care of that site, or turf. Turf management is completely different from managing planted beds. So if there's random patches of turf scattered throughout your design in amorphous shapes, that's a lot of perimeter and edging for someone to do to keep up with that turf, to keep the turf from running all over your flower bed. It might be hard to access. Sometimes I see turf areas, I just don't even know how we could get a mower in there. Let's see. Yeah, so I also recommend keeping your trees inside planted areas where they're safer. Lawn can be pretty thirsty, and weed whacker, it's really hard. It's hard to weed whack around trees without damaging them. There's a lot of ways to avoid that, but it's time-consuming. It's a challenge. Oftentimes, the bioretention bioretention is just part of a larger landscape design, so don't forget the land around your site and how that will affect it. Want to talk real quick. This is a design feature that I think gets left. This diagram is showing typical plans show a bird's eye view, and that top diagram looks like full coverage, but then in reality you look from the side and you see that's actually a field of mulch, and that needs a lot more plants. So that can be hard to get the install crew to do. Sometimes they're uncomfortable planting right up under a tree. But that is how it happens in nature, and that's okay. It's good. It's good to have a lot of plants layered like that. Okay, so I want to add to this slide, think about who's inspecting your project as it's being installed. Are they horticulturally knowledgeable? I think this is really critical. They need to know what quality looks like. And these are a lot of other things that can go wrong. We're kind of going to go through that in a second. Yeah, I spend a lot of my time redoing installation work, and that's really unfortunate. Really need to determine who will take care of your landscape and have them lined up and ready to receive it. Their budget is going to be impacted by this expanding workload. Consistent maintenance really benefits your plants, really benefits the function of your site. So there are a lot of real-world stresses to trees that could impact the health of your plants. So let's get into those. Yeah, okay, get ready for a horror show with these next slides. The tree came from the nursery like this, really, really badly chopped up, completely inappropriate heading cuts. This is contaminated nursery stock, full of weeds and weed seed. This is the worst tree planting I have a picture of. That's a full 8 inches too deep in the ground. I think they were trying to hide this knot from us. The burlap and wire cage are all still intact. This picture on the right is a flooded bioretention. Number of issues with that installation and design. This tree is probably going to be okay if it got pulled out of the water and replanted relatively quickly. There's a lot of issues with bioretention installation. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and that's just the nature of this work. This is a really heavy-duty staking that was never removed by the contractor. This is the main trunk of there were actually a bunch of willow oaks like this. Maybe 8 out of 10 had all lost their leader, their main trunk, from being strangled by this crazy staking job. That top picture is a tree being girdled by a tree tag. Let's see. Yeah, this is kind of my favorite slide, maybe. So this is not a picture of one of my trees, but I have had to deconstruct plenty of mulch volcanoes. I really worry about this practice. It's really pervasive for some reason. This is a tremendous stress to the trees. It's making girdling roots and trunk rot damage to the phloem a lot more likely. It sometimes causes the tree to expend a lot of energy growing adventitious roots and kind of just starting all over with a new root system closer to the surface. Circling roots really should be prevented, corrected in nursery stock during installation, especially with containerized plants. You got to slice up that root ball and redirect those plants outward. So I'm going to try to kind of run through this here. So why do we care? This does represent a lot more work for me and, loss of trees, but the tree health is really, again, it's just such a huge impact on the function of your site. Some herbicide damage, a lot of things going on here. I want to show in this slide, the tree is the last, on the left here, the tree was the last thing standing in this landscape. This is a completely failed bioretention design. The herbaceous layer has disappeared. Just a lot of issues I can't get into here, but I think it's significant that the tree continued working really hard, continued to pump water, right, transpire water for all these years. This site has now been rehabilitated. We've regraded this and replanted this. This has almost 100 species of native plants growing on it now. It was actually pictured in the second slide. I've discussed with coworkers, their theories on challenges. Challenges to success with using trees in bioretention. I've been told that cost can be a factor, but I think a lot of people will tell you that you can use younger, cheaper trees. They tend to be a little more vulnerable, though, right? They might get lost in the landscape and get mowed down. A bigger tree is easier to see, is a little safer, perhaps, but it's not necessarily best. In fact, it can be harder to plant a big established tree. A lot more stress from getting dug out of the nursery. So leaves are not necessarily more maintenance, it's just a different kind of maintenance. We get a lot of benefits for a little bit of work, I think, with bioretention trees. And those leaves, they can be mulch. If you're trying to keep your soil really lean, it's not too hard just to rake those up once a year. Not a big deal for me and my team, at least. Succession of the site, I think people have voiced this concern with me, that the site is going to change a lot due to the shade, and that the shade might hinder some bioremediation. Maybe that direct sunlight is important for some people. I'm not sure I fully understand that concern. But again, there's plants for every environment, so a little bit more shade, some adaptive planting, that's definitely not a problem. So I feel very strongly about this. Collaboration is really essential with this field. This is a hybrid of 2 or more disciplines coming together with green infrastructure. One person can't know everything. We've got to include maintenance and other vegetation experts. The green part, the green part in green infrastructure. We got to keep talking to each other. It's hard to find knowledgeable landscape managers, but I think if we keep asking, this is an emerging field, we need to encourage and support a higher standard of care for the sake of water quality and sustainable stewardship of the land. I really see trees and a diverse planted landscape adaptively managed for succession and sustainability as being the key to prolonging the life and preserving the quality of water managed by a site. Trees play a major role in this long game. Those roots will spread every year. Those leaves will transpire and filter more water, sequester carbon, host more microbes, more animals, all that great stuff, just on into the future. We've got some resources mentioned here. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Yeah, thank you so much for listening. It's so important that we keep experimenting and sharing. So a big thank you to Andrew and the Forest Service for hosting this webinar.